Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrives at Mar-a-Lago with about 200 Canadian lifetimes worth of carbon emissions with a 40-man crew, a motorcade fit for a modern-day American empire Caesar. But he's just Trudeau. He doesn't need this many people. He's trying to act important, trying to act tough for the Americans. And if this is not a perfect representation of this government's number one strategy of virtue signaling, I don't know what is. Now, why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about this? We are talking about this because this is in relation to the Trump tariffs. Trudeau quickly waddled to Mar-a-Lago to go speak with Trump to try to cool things down because of the 25% tariffs that Trump is threatening. And this meeting produced an iconic photo that's going to last 1,000 years. It's going to be in textbooks for another 200, 300 years. And I'm talking about this photo. Trudeau at the round table with Trump and his posse, essentially. This kid in the background, I can't really zoom into it, but he's kind of doing this gesture. That's literally the feeling of all Canadians. Just looking at this joker being essentially ridiculed by everyone at the table. You can kind of tell by their smug faces that they've been making fun of Trudeau with a diplomatic smile, right? And if this was any other politician, I would feel quite bad because it's kind of mean, especially this next point, which I'm going to show you guys, which you're going to feel a little weird about it. Because at the end of the day, this is a Canadian prime minister, but he's a loser and he's a criminal. He's a crook. He's destroyed this country's economy and he's destroyed this country's foundations, right? So I guess he deserves this next thing that happened to him. So remember, he flew to Mar-a-Lago, Florida, spent hundreds of Canadian lifetimes worth of carbon emission just to do this little conversation, which could have been done with a phone call. But he just did this because to show the media that he's actually interested in fighting for Canadians instead of fighting for himself and his pockets. People are going to say the environment, but he's not fighting for the environment. That's another conversation. I don't want to start going on a bit of a tangent. But this next thing, look at this. So Mike Waltz, the guy on the left of Donald Trump, he was famous because on Twitter, he basically was talking smack to Trudeau, saying that he's excited for Pierre Poilievre to essentially remove Trudeau from office and to clean out this progressive mess that Canada is plagued with. But that's not even the worst thing. The worst thing is this. Let me give you an example. If you were the leader of a major empire, which is the American empire, you know what? Let's just say you're home. You're inviting somebody else, a very important person, to your home. And it's somebody who, it's somebody you had relations with for quite a while. You're a friend with them and all that stuff. You'd at least offer, be like, hey, if you want to stay over, you can stay over. You know what I mean? In the case of geopolitics, it's the same thing. Whenever you're the leader of a country, you can offer for them to stay over, which Trump does to every single major leader except for Trudeau. Mar-a-Lago last night, Justin Trudeau was told there was nowhere for him to stay for the evening. So he needed to make a late night booking to a hotel in West Palm Beach, which is hilarious because Trump's property is not small at all, as you can see from the photo here. And as you can see from the number of rooms, 126 rooms, 62,500 square feet. And there wasn't enough room for Justin Trudeau to stay in it. I know that there was a community note where people were saying that this was fake news, but this is from the Global News themselves, where literally they say Global News has learned Trudeau staying overnight in West Palm Beach and will fly back to Canada on Saturday morning. He is not staying at Mar-a-Lago. What they didn't specify is that Trump didn't allow him to stay at Mar-a-Lago, which is an embarrassment. That just shows how much respect or how much lack of respect there is towards Trudeau by pretty much every foreign leader. Now, why is this important? This is important because this is in relation to the tariff threat that Trump essentially proposed or placed upon all of us. The way that this meeting was conducted, and which, by the way, the details were not revealed to us, which is actually kind of damning, and I'm going to show you why. But this meeting is essentially dictating what our futures are going to look like, at least in the next 6 to 12 months minimum. And one clip which perfectly summarizes what is likely to occur is this clip right here.
And in the short term, the administration's plan in the short term is to balance their federal budget using tariffs. And then after that, strike exemption deals on a country by country basis. So it really would appear, Renee, that in the short term, tariffs are coming. Whether or not definitively 25% will be the number, that is still, of course, unclear. But tariffs are coming.
Like this guy said, tariffs are unavoidable. Trump is now the leader of the most powerful economy, the most powerful military in history. When he negotiates, people would still listen, but the tables of negotiating would be still at an even footing because Canada and the US, whenever they're negotiating, Canada's not really keeping in mind of risk, of threats. But now, if a tariff is imposed, the Trudeau regime will have to react in a way that's going to benefit the Americans first before it benefits Canada. Because what can Trudeau do to negotiate against them, right? Place an equal tariff? That's not going to happen. Trudeau is essentially economically, symbiotically connected to the United States. So Trump not only has the backing of the most powerful military and economy, also places a tariff on the negotiating country. So Trump is going to put tariffs everywhere, all over the world. And the world has to negotiate to Trump to remove those tariffs. That's why it's very likely that we're going to see a tariff being placed on Canada. Whether or not it's going to be a major tariff is a whole other conversation. Now, moving forward to the likely scenarios. But before that, moving forward to which sectors of the Canadian economy are the biggest at risk. It's a 25% tax, and it could be reduced to like 15, 20%. Regardless, it's significant, and it's going to affect these industries the most. If you're working in these industries, expect some turbulence in the next year at least. Energy, agriculture, automotive, steel and aluminum, forestry. These are the major industries that are going to be affected by Trump's tariffs. And I wrote a bit of a paragraph here saying the nominal amount at risk across these sectors would be significant, with estimates suggesting Canada's GDP could face a hit of about 2.6% or roughly $78 billion annually due to such tariffs. I didn't pull this number out of my behind. I pulled this number from the Chamber of Commerce themselves directly. If you type in chamber.ca, then you type in Trump tariffs, Canadian economy, these numbers are going to come up. But these numbers are not taking into consideration how weak the current Canadian economy is. Now, currently, we have a GDP of about $2 trillion. We experienced a sharp growth from 2020 to 2022, but that was just the major corporations grew. The main economy, the main drivers of the economy, which is you and I, is our small businesses, our purchasing power, our value in the market has been on a steep decline. On top of the mass immigration, which has padded all of these GDP numbers, our economy isn't really at 2 trillion GDP per year. Nobody knows what it's at, but it's a lot less than that. Our true, genuine output, 78 billion, is a conservative estimate. It is not a realistic, in my opinion. What I think is realistic is something upwards of $100 billion lost. 100 billion real dollars lost. Not 100 billion on a chart for GDP, but 100 billion real dollars lost in Canadian economic output. The ripple effect on the economy as a result of these tariffs is nothing short of a catastrophe, genuinely a catastrophe. That's why the second this was announced, about 2 hours after, all the major premiers literally issued a statement saying how we need to do a Canada First policy and everybody needs to come together and negotiate a better situation for Canada. Now, to the most important part of this video and the most important part of this news. I always tell all of my followers, all of my subscribers, or anybody who just asks me for like an analysis on the current situation. Whenever you're reading the news, always think to yourself, how does this affect the economy I'm living in? It can be any news, it can even be a drug bust. How does this affect the economy I am currently living in? Because how is this going to affect my life, my family's life, my community's life? So, without further ado, the likely scenarios that we are going to see in the next 6 months, 12 months, as well as a couple of years, right? So, we will for sure see some type of tariff be kicked in. Some type. Maybe it's not 25%, maybe it's 15%, maybe it's 20%. Whatever it is, we're going to see tariffs, which means we're going to see some major effects on the economy and a bit of a snowball effect on what's going to happen in the following scenarios. We're going to see Trudeau repeal or reform a lot of policies. Number one is tightening the border between the United States and Canada. One of the main reasons that Donald Trump is putting this tariff regime in effect is because of the border. It's many reasons, but one of the reasons that even Trump himself said was that the Canadian border needs reform. It needs more security, a lot more security. Another thing we're going to see is we're going to see a restriction on illegal immigration. Now you can be like, Arya, it's illegal. It's already restricted. It's not. It's not restricted. The LMIA scams, the diploma mills, the temporary resident scam, the refugee scams, there's so many small scams within every single gray area of immigration that is being used every single day, that's being abused every single day, right? So we're going to see a tighter control on these gray areas of immigration, more clarity on what is the LMIA, more clarity on who can issue an LMIA, which is a labor market impact assessment. I made a lot of videos on this. It's primarily on my TikTok, but I'm going to bring it over to my YouTube channel. So follow so you can see them because it's very important and telling as to why we're seeing such mass immigration every single day, right? And we're also going to see many more major arrests, but we're not going to see smaller arrests, meaning we're not going to see bail reform. We're not going to see anything like that. We're going to see huge record-breaking arrests, just like this that took place a couple hours Trudeau announced his meeting with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. $40 million worth of cocaine was seized from a truck in Illinois by two Canadians. That means $40 million, almost a metric ton of Colombian Bam Bam has reached the United States from Canada. From Canada. We're going to see a huge number of these cases come to the news. Now, you can be like, but Arya, these cases and investigations take years and years on end. You're right. It does take years on end. But you know why it takes years on end? Because they're trying to build that book of crime so that they can hit the criminal with it at the end of the day. But sometimes they wait for certain political events to take place to bring this into the news so that there's more evidence of another side of politics occurring. If they put a lot of drug busts in the news, they're going to say, okay, there's justice in Canada. It's coming back. The justice system is now lubricated. It's moving. The cogs in the machine are now moving properly. When in reality, small time to medium time crime is just going unpunished on a day-to-day basis. We're still seeing hundreds of cars being stolen from Mississauga every single day, right? But these major drug busts, even there were two fentanyl labs in BC that were busted, which were record breaking. That was literally announced a couple days after Trump mentioned that there's a national security issue in Canada because of the lack of justice and the rampant immigration in this country. So you're going to see these news events hit the news cycle a lot more, but you're not going to see any type of bail reform, which is going to help you and I in our day to day lives. Trudeau is also going to look into revive energy deals like the Keystone to float the economy. Again, $100 billion lost in Canadian economic output is not a joke at all. At all. He needs to revive some type of energy deal with the Americans or with the Europeans or even with the Chinese or anybody to help keep this economy afloat, to help keep these major sectors afloat, the most important of which is energy. This is by far the most important sector, right? If this drops, Canada economically is ruined. It already is on the path of ruin, but if energy sector is shot, good luck. Good luck. Potentially, we might see the carbon tax being removed. Potentially, because the carbon tax is going to make things more problematic for Canadians. It's going to add, like, I think it's several tens of cents onto our gas bills, which is ridiculous. It's criminal. It's criminal. Why should Canadians pay for something when Canadians are responsible for only 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions? It's completely criminal. If he does not remove the carbon tax, if he does not, we will essentially see liberal environmental policies be removed from the Canadian political structure and system for the next 10 years at least. Because the damage this is going to cause, coupled with $100 billion lost because of the Trump tariffs, any following Canadian administration will not care about the ideological pursuit of saving the world, even though Canada is not responsible for the world, because we only are responsible for 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions, if that makes sense. But Trudeau might genuinely be too stupid or too ideologically driven to remove the carbon tax because it's such a major part of his regime, right? The next likely scenario that we're going to see is a drop in immigration levels substantially. Substantially. Trudeau already announced that there's going to be some type of immigration restrictions or something like that. But we're going to see that a lot more extreme, in a lot more extreme way. And why? Because not only did Trump essentially say that Canada needs to reform this part of our country, but it's also because the current border czar of the United States, Mr. Homan, he literally claimed that the Canadian border is an extreme national security vulnerability. Many migrants from countries that sponsor terror come through the northern border. We're going to lock them up. But before they lock them up, the Trump negotiating team is going to force Trudeau's hand to be much more tough on immigration in Canada. And the Trudeau regime is not, how should I say, advanced enough to do very minor reforms. So they're either going to shut it down completely or do something drastic, or most likely pretend to do something and pretend to show everybody that they're doing something when in reality nothing is actually being done. Moving forward, we're going to see a Pierre Poilievre ultra-landslide victory. It's already guaranteed that he's going to win the election. We all know that. Completely, we all know that. But we're going to see Conservative Party seats and projections grow a lot more because of these tariffs. Because rightfully so, people are going to blame Trudeau for essentially putting this country into this position, right? So if we go on 338 really quickly, 338 PPC ridings projections. So right now, it's projected that 229 seats is going to go to the Conservatives, 51 to the Liberals, 42 Bloc Québécois, 19 NDP, and 2 Green Party of Canada. So we're going to see this grow a lot more, and the Liberal is going to diminish a lot more. NDP might grow a little bit to take away the Liberal voters because people are still going to vote for the Liberals, even though the Liberals and their current tyrant, Justin Trudeau, is limiting this country's economic future. They're still going to vote for him, but it's going to be a lot less. I am predicting it's going to be probably in the high 20s to low 30s rather than 51 as a result of these Trump tariffs, which is because it's going to cause so many problems. People are going to blame nobody else but the government, obviously, obviously. And the most interesting scenario, which I believe is actually going to cause problems and friction between Canada for the next 2 years. And then it's going to be much, much better after that. Pierre Poilievre and Trump will have some type of friction. They're not going to be best buds. I know Maple MAGA is something that's kind of trending online and everything, but Pierre Poilievre as well as Donald Trump are not going to be best friends once they come in. How do I know that? Because Pierre Poilievre's recent signaling showed that he's not going to pursue the Trump relationship in a very friendly way. It's going to be more so a matter of fact, serious, and a Canada first way. Also, some of the stuff he's signaling shows that he's a little upset at Trump. But all of this is in the following video. I highly recommend you subscribe so you can see that, because this is actually the most important thing you need to know, because it's going to affect your life for the next 2 years.